Every Thursday, let's get skin to it with dermatologist Dr. Sandy Skotnicki and personal stylist and beauty enthusiast Marlo Sutton for a new episode of Skin to It, where we guide you through the maze of skincare and cut through that noise to help you achieve your healthiest skin. Skin to It, a podcast brought to you by Bioderma. Welcome to Skin to It, your guide to healthy skin. I'm Dr. Sandy Skotnicki, board-certified dermatologist.
And I am Marlo Sutton, personal stylist and beauty enthusiast. Today, we are delving into the fantastic world of mushrooms, from culinary, medicinal, and skincare. Why are mushrooms the future, and why are they so amazing?
Yes, I really am excited about this episode because I did a lot of research. I nerded out on this one. And I have to say, I kind of first, I did a podcast a few years ago, and I tried to pick, each season I wanted to pick an ingredient. So we did parabens one year. And this year I thought, I could have done something like shellac, which is getting all kinds of, or even talked about parabens again. But I thought, I just love mushrooms.
No, I think it's
I think they're
fantastic.
great, and there's so much great information. So, and the other thing that really spurred my interest was, have you seen the Netflix documentary, Fantastic Fungi?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Yes, you have to see it.
But I have learned so much in Sandy's researching of this episode. I'm really excited for everyone to learn what I have learned.
When you watch it, you're going to be like, oh, I know that. I know that. And part of the other reason I wanted to pick mushrooms, not only because they're fascinating, but the last few years have been very turbulent, very tough. And there's this real focus on sort of wellness coming from the inside out and self-care. And mushrooms are totally on point with that. And they really are fantastic, fantastic fungi.
So, as a tradition on our podcast, Sandy's going to give us more of a real medical or a real definition of what mushrooms are so that we can understand what we are talking about today.
Right. So, everyone's not as nerdy as I am, but I really like that. Mushrooms are not plants like you'd think they would be, right? They're not a vegetable. They're not a plant. They actually are closer to humans, to animals, I should say. Humans being an animal. They can't produce their own nutrients. Like they don't have chlorophyll like a plant, but, and they have to eat their own stuff, right? So, and they constitute their own kingdom. It's called fungi. And under fungi is mushroom-forming species, yeasts, and molds. And, the other really cool thing about fungi or mushrooms is that they've been in competition with bacteria for billions of years.
Okay.
So they've been fighting, like having a war. So that's where antibiotics come from, because bacteria produce the antibiotics to fight off the fungi.
Okay.
And amazing. So penicillin, which is one of the most revolutionary drugs of our lifetime, or not our lifetime, of the century, comes from a mold, which is a type of fungus, Penicillium mold.
Wow, that's amazing.
So,
I kind of knew that, but not exactly. And I've learned so much in this episode. So, I loved all your cool fungi facts.
Right.
So I guess wanted to go over a few little stats. So they are the most populous kingdom on the planet. I mean, that whole idea is just mind-blowing. An estimated 3.8 million fungi exist worldwide, and yet more than 90% of them are currently unknown to science.
It's kind of like the ocean too, right?
Right.
Yeah, and plants too. We don't know a lot about, and they're probably being extinct at the same rate.
Wow.
Yeah, that's another episode.
So mushrooms are more like us than plants. They breathe oxygen and give out CO2.
Okay.
And unlike plants that use chlorophyll and the sun, some species eat 50,000 leaves a day.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. The largest living thing on Earth is a fungus. And our feet, just in case you wanted to know this, contain more than 200 types of fungi, which really sounds
disgusting.
Yeah. And Sandy said to me earlier, it's like they help trees talk to each other. And I mean, that sounds so hippy-dippy, but
it's true.
But it's very true. And she'll explain.
I think that was my first foray into the fantastic, science of fungi. So I was reading, I like to read long lead articles like The Atlantic, Science America. And there was an amazing Canadian scientist, Suzanne Simard from BC, who really first started talking about the fact that trees can communicate to each other through fungal networks. So in the soil, all these fungal networks help trees. Like if the tree is sick, the other trees will sort of help it out. And she coined it the wood wide web,
That's
which
so
is
cool.
kind of cool. But anyway, just another fact about fungi.
Love
Yep.
that. Okay, so we're hearing this a lot. Sandy always laughs at me because I'm like on TikTok and all this stuff. So we're hearing that mushrooms are definitely a wellness trend.
Yes.
And what do you? So as a Western practicing doctor, physician, what do you think about this?
So a couple things to answer that, unpack that a little bit. There's first of all, there's over 10,000 species of mushrooms, but in the wellness sector, the main players are trimella, which we'll talk about in skincare, shaga, turkey tail, reishi, lion's mane, shiitake, and cordyceps. And we have this sort of natural resistance to natural medicines in a Western because we're not taught it. But what I really am a big believer in, and when I was researching for this episode, integrative health. Do you know what integrative health means?
Yeah, well, what I understand now is it's integrating sort of more Western practices with more Chinese or Asian medication, Eastern practices.
Herbs, plants, all this stuff. Even in meditation, wellness, mindfulness. So there are integrative. It's not like what do you say, hippie? It's actually no. But just
I knew it wasn't.
But
I
10
was
years
just
ago,
it just sounded that way.
But 10 years ago, I would have even said that.
Right.
So now we have integrative health, not only centers that you can go to, but programs. So like UCLA has an Eastern West medicine program. John Hopkins, Mayo, Stanford, Harvard, they all have training programs that you do 4 years of medicine, then you can do a year or two of integrative health. So you understand mindfulness, you understand adaptogens, or how to give a mushroom for somebody who has cancer.
So when you said it's not really taught, so it wasn't taught when you were
it's not. I don't
medical
think
school or as much.
It wasn't at all, and I don't know whether because I'm not part of. I used to do some stuff with the University of Toronto Medical School as in the undergrad sector, so I don't actually know what is taught. But there are programs that you can do both. You can do a 4-year medical degree, and then you do a year or two of integrative health, where somebody comes in.
But this is more recent.
Yeah. Somebody comes in with blood pressure, like we both have high blood pressure.
Yeah.
So we go into an integrative health specialist. They would say, okay, we're going to put you on a medicine, but we want you to do some yoga, meditation, mindfulness to see if we can get you lower your dose or get you off. So it's using both. And I really wanted to talk about Outlander. Do you know Outlander?
You told me about that show ages ago. It's a TV show.
It's a TV show
series,
and big one.
A series, and it's actually quite sexy.
Yes. Jamie's really hot.
And I watched a little bit of it, but then I didn't finish it. But yes, go ahead.
So the cool thing, the reason I bring this up is, again, when I was researching this, I actually found an article in a fairly reputable medical journal about the herbs and all the natural remedies used on the TV show Outlander. So for those who don't know what Outlander is, she's a nurse who does eventually become a doctor, but she's in Scotland. It's probably it's 1940, just after World War II has ended. And she ends up going back in time to like the Jacobite time of Scotland. And she uses all of her knowledge.
But without having the actual
she knows she
modern
goes out,
medicine. She has to forage for remedies.
That's what we were sort of talking about. A lot of our medicines, listeners, that we take for granted come from plants. So morphine comes from poppy seeds.
Right. And you said something about, somebody had a fever on the show and she did, what was this? Wood bark?
Willow bark.
Willow bark.
So willow bark is where we get aspirin from.
Cool.
The antibiotic penicillin, we talk. So there's one episode where Jamie comes into her lab and she's got about 20 mounds of bread with this green mold growing on it.
Right.
And she's trying to isolate this specific penicillium mold so she can make penicillin. So it's a very cool show. There's also great eye candy in it too. If you're not interested in the medicine science, like that. But so I think it's where we're heading.
Yeah. So I think, as humans, we're sort of at this point where we're trying to reconnect. We're reconnecting with nature, and it's not really, it's more than a trend, right? It's becoming this fundamental to our personal and collective resilience. And we're so aware now because of all the information. And, like we said about this podcast at the beginning, is we're cutting through the noise, and we're trying to give people really up-to-date information on the latest really, interesting trends. I'm going to use the word trends, but it's not. It's new information.
But that's a good point. I mean, some of this is trendy. There's tons of science. And actually, mushrooms have been, like in Japan and in Eastern medicine, they've been used for 30, 40 years. But what I do want to make a point here is the other reason for doing this podcast, not only information, but when we deal with a trend, which we've seen in some of the other episodes, unfortunately, if it's not a regulated, like mushrooms aren't regulated, they're supplements outside of eating them, right? But a supplemental mushroom or adaptogens, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. If they're not regulated and you can make a business or a marketing play out of it, you're going to have some bad players.
Right. And what I understand now, especially when we were in episode 2, we talked to this wonderful Dr. Day in New York, is these supplements do not have to be FDA approved.
Well, they're not. They're not regulated.
Sorry, they're not regulated. They're not FDA approved. So really, we just,
you don't know
if people are going to spend a lot of money, people aren't spending as much money to do the research on them as they would a drug that has to obviously go through different channels.
Well, but the other thing she pointed out, which I think I knew inherently, but I never really, when somebody points out something and you knew it all along, but until you actually articulate it, because you can't patent a mushroom.
Right.
Like when you do a drug, like a proprietary new drug, you have a patent on that. You make money off of that. So of course the companies are going to put research into that. You can't patent supplements.
Right.
So there's not a lot of research done for that reason, which is unfortunate because I think there's a lot of good to be had. And then when they're not regulated, anybody can throw 10% mushroom in a powder and the rest of it is filler and make money off.
Right.
So you just don't know what you're getting. It's part of part.
So let's get down to it. So what's the science behind mushrooms? Like what we do know?
So yeah, again, I did a lot of reading on this, and the most powerful information was on cancer, cognition, and immune function. But I do want to touch a little bit. We're not going to talk about psychedelics, but psilocybin, which is the psychedelic component of some mushrooms, has been finally in 2023. It's being allowed to be researched. Because it has incredible potential to treat mood disorders, anxiety, in particular substance abuse and post-traumatic stress. And I went to this amazing center in Algonquin Park called Dimensions, and it is a center that uses cannabis and psilocybin. I think it just got approval for psilocybin.
It's the only word that I can actually say.
In vets. In ex-military that have post-traumatic stress.
Wow.
And John Hopkins got approval in 2023 to look at psilocybin for end-of-life anxiety in cancer patients. But back to the non-hallucinogenic ingredients, the biggest research that was robust that I found was in cancer. And in particular, in China and Japan, they have been using mushrooms, in particular, reishi, turkey tail, as an adjuvant to chemotherapy. And when we say adjuvant in medicine, it means it makes something work better or like
decreases
symptoms
or bad effects, adverse effects.
Yeah. So in particular, reishi has beta glucan, which is reishi and turkey tail, which help fight cancer. They help it boost the immune system. And this is there's clinical studies. It's not just hippy dippy. Yeah.
So sorry I ever said that.
No, I like that because I think the listener understands what that means. And so on that note, the most compelling study I found was, so there's something we do in medicine when you have a lot of small studies, like 10 people, 20 people, you can corral all of those studies and you can do something called a meta-analysis. So you take, there were 17 cancer studies looking at the effect of eating mushrooms and cancer risk from 1966 to 2020.
Okay.
And their conclusion was, and I read the study, 18 grams of mushrooms, which is about 1/8 of a cup a day, can lower your cancer risk by 45%. In this population.
That's astounding. Sorry, that was the word.
Needless to say, I ran out and bought some mushrooms after that.
So you bought mushrooms, and then, yes. So I think when we were talking about this earlier, I said, well, how are you actually eating them? Are you eating them raw? Are you cooking them? So actually the best way is to cook them.
So we read up on that.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't know that because there are some issues with some raw mushrooms. I don't know all the ins and outs, but you listeners, eat them, eat lots of them, but cook them first. I cook them on high heat and butter. That's always how I was told to.
Yeah. Butter, olive
mushrooms.
oil.
Yeah.
Little salt and pepper.
But in the one of the things I wanted to talk about, the ingredient in particular in the reishi mushrooms is ergothioneine, which is a powerful antioxidant, has been shown to help with cellular damage. But eating any mushrooms, all mushrooms have this ergothioneine in it. But
except poisonous mushrooms.
Yeah, they probably have it too, but they have all the bad stuff too. That's that red one with the white dots. You definitely don't want to eat. I saw that in Slovenia.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Last thing I want to mention about the cancer is, so on one of the top cancer centers in the world is Sloan Kettering. And on Sloan Kettering's website, they actually have a page dedicated to reishi mushrooms. The
Very
good
cool.
stuff, the bad stuff, the fact that, the beta glucans we talked about, the ergothione. But just to read a little bit from the website. So reishi has been shown to protect kidneys and liver of patients on chemotherapy, help with nausea from chemotherapy, enhance efficacy of radiotherapy, increase sensitivity of ovarian cancer cells to chemotherapy, enhance tumor response of patients with colon cancer. I mean, this is pretty powerful stuff.
Yep.
So, unfortunately, if you go to your regular physician, they may not know much about it, but I think if you went to your oncologist, hopefully they should know.
They should know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that was my next question. If you're not listening to our podcast, which you hopefully are, where are you getting this information, and what are you doing with this information? So, well, eating more mushrooms.
More mushrooms. That's the simplest thing to do.
Mushrooms.
Eat mushrooms as much as you can. Whenever I go out and I try to mushroom risotto, I love mushroom risotto or mushroom soup.
Yeah.
If you don't like mushrooms, because your husband doesn't like mushrooms,
he doesn't like mushrooms.
You can take it in a supplement. I mean, I guess the science there, we'll get into a little bit of that, but we'll talk about that now. So when I watched the Fantastic Fungi episode on Netflix, I was very impressed. The main player in the episode was this fellow called Paul Stamets, who's a mycologist on the west coast of the US. And I mean, he's been doing this for 20 years. On his website are hundreds and hundreds of scientific studies that he sort of corralled on different aspects. And he grows his own fungi, and he has sort of perfected extraction methods because there's some controversy about powders versus extracts. I think they're both efficacious, and I don't know the ins and outs of all that. But here's the point about supplements, which we already sort of mentioned. I buy this fellow's supplements. His company's called My Community. I don't have any financial aspects of recommending this, but this is a guy who's been doing it since the beginning. He grows his own fungal species. He has perfected extraction methods. So the other supplements, I don't know what I'm getting necessarily because they're not regulated. So I take his. I take a general one, and I take one for cognitive function, which
so let's get into that because I mean, you can tell your own story and sort of why that's really important to you, but I mean, I think it's important to all of us as we age.
Well, it's the scariest thing that as we age we have to face or think about is dementia.
Yes.
So the fancy medical term is cognitive function or cognitive decline. And so I started taking a brain health supplement from My Community that has the lion's mane mushroom and also ginkgo biloba, because it increases. There's also a thought that Alzheimer's is a vascular disease where if you increase the blood supply to the brain, that's what ginkgo does.
Okay.
So one of the studies I came across was a smaller study out of Singapore looking at patients who were at risk of getting mild cognitive impairment, which is the precursor to Alzheimer's.
Okay.
And if they ate 2 cups of berried mushrooms a week. So again, a lot of these studies are about eating mushrooms. Remember when we were talking about eating an orange to get vitamin C versus taking a supplement? So a lot of the studies, listeners, always about eating something is better, like eating a tomato for the lycopene.
Right.
But I mean, if you can't, like if you're busy like us doing the podcast all the time, you have to take some
If you're
mushrooms.
busy podcasting,
you have to take mushroom supplements.
You need to take the supplement.
But anyway, so lion's mane has another weird, some of these names, like you don't see them in any other plants, like the ergothione, and the other one in lion's mane is called heracinone, which has neuroregenerative properties.
That's very
shown
interesting.
in vivo studies, which is in like a petri dish.
Right.
So, yeah, so these people who took the 2 cups of mushrooms a week had a 50% lower risk of developing mild cognitive impairment. So
It's amazing.
I'm definitely taking those now.
Yeah. And then I also just saw something that said you should dance as much as possible. I think that's really good.
And floss your teeth.
I floss every day.
The bacteria in the gums somehow has an associated, and again,
so my husband doesn't eat mushrooms, but he flosses every day.
Yeah.
And ever since I've been with him, I floss every single day. I actually feel very strange if I don't floss.
Dancing.
And dancing.
But
dancing, there you go. Floss, eat mushrooms, and dance. There you go.
Not just dancing, but dancing with a partner because your brain is doing something different. And also walking backwards. Yeah.
I was walking backwards and dancing at Whole Renfrew today, and I'm not joking.
And they're not just, again, little frivolous things. There has been some studies to show that. I follow this neurosurgeon on Instagram who talks a lot about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's also, I think, what I understand from the dancing is, well, first of all, it's like if you can learn some steps or if you can learn a dance, it's pushing your brain to kind of pick something up that it wouldn't, and it's making it work. And that's
it's the same as learning a new language, learning an instrument, learning bridge. All those things are good to do as you get older.
Right. So let's talk about, I mean, Sandy has read like so much, and I've learned so much from her, some other clinical studies on mushrooms.
Yeah, just to wrap up, the lesser clinical studies that were not as robust show that mushrooms make their own vitamin D. So if you don't want to take a vitamin D, you can just eat the mushrooms.
Okay.
The gut microbiome, I'm sure some of you have heard of a prebiotic. So that prebiotic means food for the bacteria.
Okay.
So mushrooms are like food for the bacteria in your gut. So I think stimulate the good, healthy growth rather than sugar, which is going to stimulate the microbiome that you don't want. And then there's some lesser anecdotal, like showing lower blood pressure and blood sugar control, in particular with reishi mushrooms.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is interesting because I've, since we've done this podcast, I've learned what adaptogens are. We can tell you again, but I think of mushrooms as adaptogens, and I've heard this, said quite a bit. So explain to us again what an adaptogen is and what mushrooms do with respect to that. And I know it has to deal with, dealing with the stress in your body.
Right. So again, something I learned about, reading about, I've heard the term before. It's not necessarily a regulated medical term. The FDA doesn't recognize it. Most of the neither does Canada, but the definition are roots and herbs. One of the biggest one is Asian ginseng, and then ashwagandha and reishi. They help our body manage stress. So let's talk a little bit about stress. What is the science of stress? So here's a long word for you. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
Yes.
HPA.
I think I can say that.
Can you say it? Let's try it.
Hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
Good. So you sometimes hear these people say about adrenal fatigue. Like that's not a medical term. And by the way, your adrenals don't get fatigued. They can get overused. So what's happening is this axis, this HPA axis, is what drives our fight and flight response. So like if you're being chased by a tiger, this is the pedal's going to be on this response. Your brain is going to push out mediators that make your sympathetic system go crazy. Your heart rate's going to go up. Your cortisol is you're fighting and you're flighting, right?
Okay.
So, and the opposite of that, by the way, is the parasympathetic system. You sometimes hear about this when you're talking about meditation and mindfulness. You want to engage your parasympathetic system because that's the sort of opposite. It's your relaxed nervous system. So it makes you relax. And the adaptogens are supposed to help. Again, I don't know all the science, and I don't think actually anybody really knows the science, that they help, decrease this pedal. They take a little bit of the pedal off, help our immune system fight fatigue. And there are clinical studies. So again, this is looking at use of adaptogens, some of the ones I discussed in post-surgery recovery. It's congestive heart failure. These are huge stresses on our system. And so they have shown that some of these adaptogens will make these people recover more quickly. So again, it's not hippy dippy. There is some science.
Really? Here she goes again. Okay, so big topic on my mind as I just turned 53 a couple of days ago. Thank you. So longevity and what are the things we're going to put mushrooms into our diet also for longevity? And I think there's some interesting studies on that as well.
So I'm really enjoying, I have for a while, a physician in the US called Peter Attia. I think many people have heard of him. He just published a book called Outlive. His podcast is called Drive. And, I've just finished his book. And he kind of looks at medicine like there's medicine 1.0 and medicine 2.0. So 2.0 is looking at medicine from a preventative point of view. And medicine 101 is you get 1.0, you get high blood pressure and then you treat, or you get cognitive impair and then we're looking at it 10 years in advance and saying, what can we do? So I do a lot of what he does. He takes ashwagandha, he takes athletic greens that have reishi powder. Again, I have no association with any of these things, but I think he's great, and I think longevity is the new sort of thing that we have to focus on.
Right. Yeah. We want to get old and we want to live well when we're older.
Yeah. What did Dr. Day say? We want to live.
Be young when we're old. Wait, what was it? Oh no, we have to go back and look at that. Yeah. It was perfect.
The point is you want to live well as you age, not just you don't want to just live till you're 95 and not have good quality of life.
Right. It's about the quality of life as you get older. So I think we have to get into, because this is called Skin to It, our podcast, and we've learned so much, but let's get down to maybe talk about how mushrooms are going to make our skin look amazing.
So, I mean, this is the smaller part of the podcast, because when I picked this topic, I really was just fascinated and wanted to research more about the internal aspects of fungus, of mushrooms. But mushrooms are, very trendy in skincare. So originally they were first used in a brand called Origins. Dr. Wheel, I think, we weren't sure how to pronounce his name properly. Mega mushroom syndrome, a serum.
Not a syndrome, it's a serum.
Mega mushroom serum.
And then I realized that I use 3 Ships Dewdrops every single day. It is my favorite serum by far. I love it.
And it has trimella
in it, which is a mushroom. So that's really cool.
So some of the more, the one ingredient in skincare that I think has some merit to it, has a bit of science backing, is trimella. So trimella is this snow mushroom. It kind of looks really white and fluffy. I don't think you eat it. And it's like, it looks sort of fluffy because it has this ingredient that acts like hyaluronic acid. And so I don't even think I knew this. Most hyaluronic acid in skincare comes from biofermentation of lactic acid bacteria. So basically it's bacteria colonies pumping out this hyaluronic acid that they then purify. And it's a big molecule, so it doesn't absorb very well into the skin. So the trimella mushroom, which contains this ingredient that looks like hyaluronic acid, is smaller. I think it's a great humectant. Humectant means an ingredient that helps draw in water.
I knew that.
Yeah. And some of the other ingredients in skincare, like there's smaller studies. Some of them are internal, which means the company is doing them. They're not double-blind randomized. And again, that goes back to what we were talking about, why supplements aren't rigorously studied, is you can't patent reishi ingredient in skincare.
Right.
So
anyone
anybody can use it. So why would a company spend all kinds of money in it?
Right.
So that the soft studies are that they are anti-irritant, in particular the reishi and the shaga. Reishi is a powerful antioxidant, might help with wrinkles and brown area, litigo we call it, or browning of the skin.
And I love the idea that it can be used for packaging. I mean, because we did this whole episode on sustainability, and that's part of it.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting.
But I want to say the other ingredient was...
Oh, sorry.
So it's okay. Kojic acid comes from shiitake mushrooms. That was one of the only evidence-based studies for a mushroom ingredient other than the trimella. It's kojic acid is an ingredient that we use to lighten the skin. It decreases melanin production. It's in shiitake mushrooms. But what you're talking about, and I love that. I totally geeked out on that. So you take mushrooms and you give it food and you put it into a mold and it can produce the packaging. They also do it for face sheets. You can make mycelial face sheets.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
Yep. I love it.
So I think we can end off with some of the things you have to look out for. I mean, we have to remember that medicinal herbs and supplements we just said they can have lots of effects on our cognition, on our immune function, on cancer. So they can have side effects.
Sure.
So unfortunately, a lot of Western physicians aren't going to know that much unless they are interested in integrative health. So if you're pregnant, if you're breastfeeding, if you have low blood pressure, blood clotting, you have a surgery coming up, you're having chemotherapy, you should discuss, if you want to investigate any of these supplements, you should talk about it with your physician. Your oncologist will probably know more about it. Reishi can cause increased bleeding. It can interfere with some of the blood tests that we do to monitor cancer therapies. So you have to be cognizant of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's totally amazing.
So I think we
covered so much.
I think we killed mushrooms.
Oh God. I don't even know what to ask anymore. I think I had to actually absorb it and take it all in. I'm going to re-listen to this episode myself.
I want to end off with something, because we were sort of, when we were prepping for this, I think this is very important to keep in mind. Most of the science, and science is incredible, that we covered and I researched, is really the benefits for internal use, and also eating the mushroom and making sure you cook it first and have a variety. But in some of the skincare stuff, you have to make sure when you're looking at advertising from a skincare brand, they're not conflating the benefits of the supplement internally with the benefits of topical use, because they are very different.
Sure.
And the studies for the skin are smaller and more anecdotal and not rigorous.
Right.
So,
but I'm guessing if they are using some kind of mushroom in a product, it's probably a smaller amount, or
yeah, the actives are usually, well, it depends. It depends on the product. The point is just the research for the topical is not as robust as the internal. So let's end off with, what do you do?
Oh yeah, so I know Sandy asked me this earlier. Vitamin D, magnesium, and you know what, I just started Nutrafol for my hair, because
from our hair episode.
Yes, well, unfortunately, I had I now understand, maybe due to stress or several things, I had pretty big shed.
Yeah.
And it's not the first time in my life that's happened. So all of a sudden I went from feeling like I had all this hair to feeling like I had no hair.
But you also feel more, not as stressed about it, because you know why you have it. You know that it's going to grow back. Some of the things you can do, which I hope that when you listen to the hair episode, you come away with that confidence that you know what's going on.
Yeah. So I'm taking it seriously. And I mean, the thing about taking some of these supplements and things is you have to be really consistent.
Yes, you have to be consistent.
So I'm on it, and I do I take, because I have high blood pressure and high cholesterol, and it's hereditary. So I know. Yeah, we've talked about this, because I exercise and keep my weight in check. I eat healthy and all of that. But but I'm gonna add. I do love mushrooms and I eat mushrooms, but I'll be adding lots of other supplements.
I try to eat 2 helpings of mushrooms a week now. I take every morning. We talked about the shake. I take collagen powder, and I take
marine collagen.
I take marine collagen. I take athletic greens. I take blueberries, all that stuff in the morning. We talked about that. But at night, I take ashwagandha, 600 milligrams. I take the mushroom, the general mushrooms, and then the brain health ones, which also contain the lion's mane and the ginkgo. And that's it. I mean, I think that supplements are controversial, but I mean, you have to do the work. You have to listen to the podcast and understand what we've told you, and watch the episode. I mean, even from the cinematography, like watch the mushroom spores come up and they go out into air.
They are very beautiful.
They are beautiful. Some of them are deadly beautiful.
True.
And billions of years old. So we can learn a lot from the engineering of the plants, what they've done, and mushrooms and all of it over the past billion years. We don't have to reinvent that. We can actually utilize some of that.
Love it.
Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you learned a lot. I will put some of these scientific studies in the notes for listeners who are interested, and I'll put up the My Community Mushroom website.
Amazing. Thank you, Sandy, for doing this incredible research and for teaching us so much.
Thank you. We'll see you next time on Skin to It.
Thank you.
Catch us every Thursday for a fresh, exclusive dose of Skin to It. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on the skincare wisdom. We will guide you through the maze of skincare and cut through that noise to help you achieve your healthiest skin. Loving our podcast? Share your thoughts and help us grow by leaving a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Until we meet again, see you soon on Skin to It, your guide to healthy skin. Skin to It, a podcast brought to you by Bioderma.